Good morning, everyone. Guys, I've got some inside information just for you guys from the Ukraine front involving the North Korean incident, what's happening out there. We've got South Korean potential involvement now. But guys, before we get into that, can you please click the buttons down below? And what do? We subscribe, follow. There's a bell down there as well, so you guys get notified when I do a new video. Guys, the situation, so I was talking to her, I was on a group call last night with some friends from one in the United States, one in Ukraine. If people are thinking now that we're not, I mean, I think we're already in a world war. I don't see at what point people right now, I don't see any time in our, I don't see at any time when somebody's going to come out and say, yeah, guys, we're in a world war. I think we're just all going to be fighting at some point and we're just going to think, yeah, and then when it stops, we'll look back and we'll say, yeah, guys, this was a world war. But right now, just contextualize this, guys. If I told you this, if I told you a year ago that the situation in Ukraine will have advanced to such a level whereby the United Kingdom are just plowing like billions and billions into this. We're taking money we're stealing money from the Russians and then giving it to the Ukrainians to fight the Russians. If I told you that the Ukrainians would have taken and held a piece of, would have invaded Russia and are holding that ground, if I'd have then told you that South Korean troops are now entering this conflict as boots on the ground, what would you have said? You would have said, yeah, that is pretty much World War III. Now, from what I was speaking to my friends last night, so they're saying that South Korean troops are now going to enter this battlefield as, as interrogators, as interpreters, as intelligence gathering, and as boots on the ground on the Ukrainian side. So now you've got literally two more countries joining this battle space. Guys, at what point do we accept that we're in a world war? Well, at what point do we accept that we're in a global conflict? So there's a few things. I gave a quick search on mainstream media to see if I could find anything about this. And all I could find really about this is about South Korea thinking about South Korea weighs in on sending arms to Ukraine as North Korean troops join Russia. So if something's out on the mainstream, it means it's a given. So that's, and I'll put all these links in the description, guys. So that's, South Korea now looking like they're going to be arming the Ukrainians, and also South Korea potentially sending boots on the ground to act as interrogators, to act as intelligence gathering, and to go on the front line and support the Ukrainian troops. It seems like it's more of an it seems like it's more of a when this is going to happen now. So a lot of people are talking about this happening in November. I spoke to my sources on the ground in Ukraine. They're saying the logistics is not, they don't seem to be the logistics doesn't appear to be full yet for the, for this big Russian push. So if remember what we've been saying for a couple of weeks now, the Russians are planning a big push on, again, this is just my analysis from my sources. So I'm hearing that the Russians are about to do a big push on multiple axes, and the Russians don't have the logistic support yet ready to, ready to support that. If we think back to the 2022 invasion, the Russians had their toes, severely burnt by overextending, by thinking their military was more competent than it actually is. So this time they do the big push. I don't think they're going to make that mistake twice. So what I think they're going to do is they're going to be overcompensating. So they're going to be moving slower than they could, but they're also going to be having that logistical support, right there behind them where they need it. Because what happened in the 2022 invasion, the Russians were just motoring ahead. They were uncoordinated. They were the command and control was pretty much zero, and they were just pushing ahead. Rogue units were pushing ahead on their own, and you just can't do that in a modern battlefield. You can't do that when drones are above you. You can't do that when your enemy's got artillery. You leave yourself exposed, and you leave yourself exposed, and it's just a non-starter. So now what they're going to do, I think they're going to push forwards as a line on multiple axes, and the Ukrainians really don't have there's nothing left in Ukraine to push now. They don't have the capacity. They don't have the manpower to hold this advance. So let's just go with it. Let's just say that this happens. Let's say that the North Koreans have now been deployed. They're pushing. They're making ground. They've taken Pokrovsk. They're pushing in multiple directions. On the south, they're up to the Dnipro, and they're pushing, taking ground every day. What argument do the West have not to deploy troops? What argument is there when Zelensky goes to Macron and says, hey, Macron, bro, remember when we was doing those, like, you know, those bro handshakes and we were shaking hands and, you know, remember all that stuff you pledged? Like, can I have it now? You know, what argument is there to stop this happening? I genuinely don't see a legitimate argument to stop this. You know, there could be a situation where the Ukrainians deploy a ton of South Korean troops into the battle space. That could happen. I think the time it would take to organize this and to get this on the ground and moving, I think that would be difficult. I think the easiest to deploy would be the Polish troops. Politically, that would be the logistically, that would be the easiest. Poland is the closest country. They've got all their logistics already in place. They've got all their manpower, obviously, in Poland, you know, and the Polish could then push into Ukraine up to the Dnipro, cover the northern corridor, and that then would be able to give those troops that were on rear duty, that would give them, you know, relieve them to go and, you know, support the troops in the east of the country. I don't think we're at a stage yet where NATO troops would be actively involved in combat with Russian or North Korean troops, but, you know, we are heading there. Now, let's not forget that the North Koreans do as they're told from their master, and their master is China. So this whole situation, it's you know, and you know, like, so the guys, the group call was on last night. The guys in, you know, the guys in America, they were saying, you know, it looks, you know, from where they're saying, it looks like things are dying down. And we was like, listen, guys, you know, we had to give them, you know, we had to brief those guys up and tell them the situation on the ground, what was actually happening. You know, obviously they know about these North Korean troops. There's a lot of talk. My speculation, the North Korean troops would be involved in, you know, as a drone army, you know, potentially, because then you've got that command and control. You don't really need, when you actively involve foreign nations in your tactical units, you have a huge problem with the language barrier. You know, they don't speak your language. You don't speak their language. And as an added complexity, Ukrainians in that region are also speaking Russian. So you've got two enemies that are speaking the same language. Yes, I know Ukrainians speak Ukrainian, but they also speak Russian. You know, you've got two enemies now. You've got two combatants now facing off against each other. They've both got AK variant weapon systems. They're both in the same, you know, relatively same camouflage equipment. You know, and they're both speaking the same language. That has got a massive, you know, a massive risk for blue on blue in this situation, you know, whereby friendly forces are attacking friendly forces. You know, it would be carnage. So obviously the Russians are going to know this. And again, you know, I would like to think the Russians have some sort of competency in their command and control, but equally, you know, the Russians may not know this, and the Russians may just throw these guys forwards. But if it was me, logistically, tactically, strategically, you would want to keep these as a unit, or you want these guys just behind the front line, and you want them to take over completely the drone operation. So that's flying drones, operating drones, building drones, reconfiguring drones, you know, repairing them, all that sort of stuff. You could have them just behind the front line. Equally, you know, if you keep them together, a lot of people are saying that they're going to keep these 12,000 North Korean troops together, and they're going to push the Ukrainians out of the Kursk region. I don't know if that's going to be feasible, because if that does happen and the North Koreans fail, remember, these North Koreans have never been tested in combat. That's not to say that they're good. That's not to say that they're bad. That's to say they've never been tested, and we don't know. The Ukrainian troops, they have been tested. They know how to fight. They know how to do war. And, you know, a lot of people, they always come up to me and they say, Sean, what do the military do? Do you do like, you know, do you do like smashing rocks on your stomach with a sledgehammer? And do you do like, you know, all this kung fu back-flipping hatchet attack? I'll say no. Basic things done right wins conflicts, and that's the reality. Okay, you know, you have a basic set of tactics that everybody understands, that everybody can do when they're cold, when they're wet, when they're hungry. You know, everybody can do them when you don't have the right chain of command. Everybody's rehearsed, everybody knows their job. That's how you win a conflict. Backflipping hatchet attacks, guys, I'm sorry, they're for like John Woo films. They're not, you know, it's pointless. But, you know, people do this, and you do see these regimes in that part of the world doing backflipping hatchet attacks and, you know, jumping through rings of fire. I don't know where in your tactical analysis, you know, you're thinking and you're like, right, guys, there's only one thing for it. We have to jump through that hoop of fire. It's just not there, guys. I've never seen a hoop of fire on a battlefield, and I've been to a fair few battlefields. Anyway, guys, that was the gist of this video. South Korean troops to be deployed in Ukraine, initially as interrogators, intelligence gathering, but also going on the front line. Potentially a further deployment of South Korean troops on the ground in Ukraine. Guys, if you think, and again, guys, remember, this is my speculation, my analysis. This is what I'm getting from my sources in Ukraine. Guys, if you think that we're not heading towards a global conflict of an industrial scale right now, you know, you really need to have a look what's happening in the world. Anyway, guys, I'm going to Mac to Grid. I'll get you guys another video later.